videos, I had an introduction and I also went over the core mechanics of the game. Now I'm just going to play through a few rounds just to show you how that would play over the course of a game. So I've already set up the board. I've randomly generated starting areas. These are what we had last time, so I just placed them back how they were. The contested cards have been set out. I've also set up the event cards for the first period, so 14 of those cards are available. And I've removed some cards. So first thing we're going to do, like we talked about in the prior video, is we're just going to draw some cards for each player. And I'm going to be playing through both sides. So each player is going to draw 4 country cards and 2 event cards. Okay, so we're gonna let's look at the Europe player first. So first of all, it's when you're deciding what your actions are going to be at the very beginning of the game. The only thing you really know is what events you have and the potential events that are in the deck if you've played it before. So with the Western Europe player might look here and say, okay, maybe we're going to try to start posturing. We've already got some NATO influence here in the Eastern Balkans. That doesn't really help for either of these two cards. This one would need NATO influence in the Western Balkans. This one would be European Union influence in the Eastern and Western Balkans. But it's worth more victory points. So the more straightforward one would be this Bosnian War here. So let's just say that the Western Europe player is going to start posturing for that. And then meanwhile, the Russia player has drawn one card that's beneficial for the Western Europe player, and then one that's beneficial for the Russia player. So there's a couple of different approaches. One is, since it's a two-player game, it's essentially zero-sum. You can definitely play a denial strategy where the Russia player could start investing heavily in the Baltics, so that if this card is ever forced to be played, the Russia player could make sure they have it. One thing that I didn't cover before is, in this condition, is to meet it, the Western Europe player would have to have more NATO influence than Russia in the Baltics, and they would have to have an army in the Baltics. So Russia could stop them by making sure there's no army there. For simplicity, we're just going to have the Russia player concentrate on this one, which is Russia having more influence in Azerbaijan than the European Union. So the Russia player, it is beneficial for them to cycle through their deck because it's so small, it's only 7 cards, as quickly as possible with their best cards. That's often a good strategy. So we're just going to say he's going to take these 2 cards, which are the best couple that he has. And then the European Union player is going to take a couple of good cards too. We'll say France, and we'll just say, since he's placing NATO influence, that's what he wants to do in the Western Balkans, this Finland card wouldn't necessarily be great, but maybe this Norway card. So the Western Europe player would have 11, the Russia player would have 12. They would announce those initiatives to each other. So the Russia player would go first. And if we look at the actions available to them, the Russia player has a good suite of different actions here. Keeping in mind, he really wants Azerbaijan. So what we're going to say he'll do is he's going to use this Volga Federal District card to place influence. So he's going to reveal the card to the other player. He's going to place a new influence. I'm sorry, so he already had influence in Azerbaijan. I forgot we had that here. So actually, he doesn't even need to do that. He doesn't need to place it. So we'll say he's going to, let's just say he'll just take money. So he'll take 3 money. That's a pretty straightforward action. Russia player starts with only 4 money, so it's always good to have a little bit more. So he's going to take 3 with this card, and then it's going to get discarded. And then with this card, he's going to increase his influence in Azerbaijan to 4. Okay, so that gives him a good amount of influence in Azerbaijan, but it doesn't force him to take the card yet, because he doesn't really want the card until he has to have it, because it's going to be cycling through his deck pretty quickly. So he's going to discard those cards. I'm just going to move these to get a little bit more room. So he'll discard those cards, and now it's the Western Europe player's turn. So again, he's really trying to get NATO influence in the Western Balkans. So he'll use the Norway card to place the influence. He's placing a new asset on the board, so he pays 2 money. And then he's going to use the France cards to increase it to 5. So he's doing a good job of going ahead and getting a dice raised very high in the Western Balkans. And so we would just go through this deck here until we find the card. So there's the Western Balkans card. He's already got influence because he's got a 5 in it. So he's going to take it. He'll put this in his discard. So let's clean this up a little bit. So he's going to put the Western Balkans card in his discards. He used the France card, so we'll put that there too. And he used the Norway card to place it. So his turn's over. Now the last thing is it's a green turn, the green event marker, which means that the Western Europe player needs to place an event. So he's going to play Bosnian War. So he's already, the Bosnian War. So he's already well postured to win this event. He's got 5 NATO influence, which is really high off right from the start. And that's it. That's the first turn. So let's go ahead and play another turn. So each player at the end of the turn will draw up. They'll draw their total of 4 cards. The Western Europe player played an event, so he needs a new one. And the Russia player will draw 2 cards, but he didn't play an event, so he won't have to draw. We advance the turn marker, and it's the beginning of the next turn. Okay, so the Russia player has already started posturing for this Azerbaijan, the dynastic succession card. So he's already well postured for Azerbaijan. Maybe he's going to go ahead and finish that by go ahead and playing more influence there, take it to 6. So if we look at the cards that can do that, we need to be able to place 2 influence. So any of the 3 of these, only Kaliningrad would be the one he couldn't use that for. So let's say we'll just take the Southern Federal District card to increase his influence. And if he's going to combat the Western Europe player in the Western Balkans, he's going to need to place influence. So he's still got some time. Maybe he'll use his Kaliningrad card or his Northwest Federal District card to place influence and to try to stop this event from occurring. Okay, so meanwhile, the Western Europe player feels pretty good about the Western Balkans. So maybe now it's time to look at another couple of cards. So we drew the Genes Revolution card, which is all about Belarus. So he could start playing some European Union influence there, just in case he's forced to play this card later. But I think let's just continue to focus in the Balkans. So he's going to start posturing for European Union influence in the Balkans here. So maybe we'll use Finland because it has the ability to place European Union influence. And maybe we'll play Spain and Portugal. And we'll talk about why in just a second. So the initiative difference will be 9 for Russia, 7 for Western Europe. In the case of a tie, Russia would win initiative. So, I'm sorry, the Western Europe wins initiative. So we look at this, and Russia wins, so it's going to go first. So we'll use the Southern Federal District to increase influence. So we're going to increase Azerbaijan to 6. And that gets us the Azerbaijan card, which goes into the discard. And we're going to use the Northwest Federal District to place influence in the Western Balkans, and that costs 2 money. Okay, at least give the Western Europe player something to think about. Maybe we're going to try to contest that. Now the Western Europe player sees that, but still, let's go ahead and continue down our path of maybe trying to get this event later on. So we're going to place European Union influence in either one of the 2 Balkans. Ultimately, we're going to have it in both if we want to achieve this card. So let's play it in the Eastern Balkans. That's using Finland. And since we're placing that, we're going to have to spend 2 money. We're going to get some money back. One thing I should point out that's not obvious here based on the setup. Money is kept hidden behind a player screen. So you can sort of track your opponent's money account, but by early to mid game, it's likely that you'll kind of start losing track of precisely how much they have. So you won't know if certain actions are or are not available to them unless you're closely tracking how much money they've spent. Okay, and then with the Spain and Portugal card, what we're going to do is we're just going to use the move army action. So let's say we use the move army action, and what we want to do is we're going to take this army from Spain and Portugal. It could come from anywhere, so I don't have to use it from here. But he's pretty remote. Let's go ahead and get him in action. So moving here is free. Then we're going to move him into the Eastern Mediterranean Sea. So that's going to spend 1 money. And then we're going to spend 1 money to get him up here into the Western Balkans. And the reason we're doing that is we don't want the Russia player to come back later on and place an army here and potentially knock down the dice. So this is a sort of defensive, early defensive move to make sure that we don't have to, we don't lose this influence later on. Okay, and that's the end of actions for round 2, but now the Russia player needs to play their card. So we already talked about it. We're going to put this Azerbaijan card into play. So he places it, the turn marker and the round marker advance, and we're going to play, he's going to get a new event. The Russia player will draw their last card, so they've already gone through their deck. Now they're going to shuffle, and remember that Azerbaijan card's in there now. It's a very weak card, but he was forced to take it if he wanted to try to get that event. So here's his new hand. The Europe player draws a couple new cards, and I should point out the Europe player still has over half their deck, or right at half their deck. So another point of asymmetry is how the decks play very differently. So the Russia player is constantly churning through their deck, trying to balance the powerful and the weaker cards, whereas the Europe player has to get through this much larger deck with some very powerful cards like the UK that I just drew, and then some very weak cards like Greece. Okay, so round 3. We've already talked about the Europe players really going for this other Balkans card, and the Russia player now has 2 different Europe cards. So he's going to have to play one somewhere. Now let's look at this card. If he plays it, he's going to be contesting for European Union influence in the Balkans over Russia, which you're looking at this, he's already sort of behind the power curve here in the Western Balkans. He's already seen that the Western Europe players heavily invested there. So maybe this Baltics card is one to start posturing for. So we're going to play the Southern Federal District in Moscow, and then the Western Europe player is playing for this Balkans card. That's what he's thinking about. Or maybe he wants to completely shore up this Western Balkans thing. Maybe he wants to go all the way to 6 here and ensure that he's going to get that. So we'll just play, we'll play Denmark, and we're going to play Benelux. Okay, so the initiative difference is 11 to 12. The Europe player goes first. We're going to say he uses Benelux card to increase this to 6. He already has the Western Balkans card in his deck, so there's no change there. He's just making sure he's got 6, so it can't be reduced. It would require the Russian player to come in, or take out the army, bring in an army, and knock it down to 5 before he could ever get his dice into 6. So that's pretty safe. And then for the United Kingdom and Ireland, he's going to place actually what he'll do, he's getting pretty low on money, and this is a 4 money production, so he's going to take 4 money. Okay, and now the Russia player, we already talked about this, so he's got Azerbaijan locked up. This Balkans thing here looks like a foregone conclusion, so maybe it's time to stop fighting that so much. So let's start posturing for this Baltics card. So if he places Russian influence in the Baltics with the Southern Federal District, that would cost a couple of money to do that. I just lost track of whether I paid for that, so we'll say I didn't. And then he'll use Moscow to increase it by 4, which takes him all the way to 5, and he now takes the Baltics card. So it's clear to the Western Europe player that the Russia player is making a play here for the Baltics. Even though he hasn't played a card yet, it's clear that there's either some sort of fake maneuver to try to draw the attention away from here, or he actually is planning to play an event later on. So the Western Europe player will go ahead and play this Balkans card, and the round advances to 4. We're just going to play a couple more here because I want to show you how it cycles back around, and we'll play for an event here. So the Russia player will draw a couple more cards. The Europe player will draw a couple more cards. The Europe player needs to replace their event. And now we have the reverse. The Europe player knows they're going to have to play one of these two. They're both Belarus. Perhaps this card, because it would only provide the Russia player 1 point, is more enticing. Or this one, which even though it would give him 2 points, is much harder for the Russia player to accomplish because the Western Europe player could block it with either NATO or a European Union influence. So it'd be, I'd say much. It would be a little bit more difficult. So, and then meanwhile, the Russia player continues. He's going to probably play this Baltic card this time. So you probably want to lock that up and then maybe react to whatever the Western Europe player is going to do. Because he's reacting, maybe he wants to go second in the turn, and especially if he doesn't care what action he necessarily is taking, if it's first or not. So let's we'll take a couple of decent actions. So Northwest Federal District and the North Caucasus Federal District. So that's an 8 initiative. And meanwhile, the Europe player doesn't know what's happening in the Baltics, but he knows he needs to go ahead and play down some European Union influence in Western Balkans. So maybe he uses Austria for that, and then Germany. So the difference here is 9 to 8. So he's going to do exactly that. He'll play influence into the Western Balkans for 2. And then he is going to increase that to 5 using the Germany card. And then meanwhile, the Russia player is going to he's going to go ahead and lock up the Baltics. So he'll increase the influence there to 6. And when I say lock up, I mean that he put it at 6, so the Western Europe player couldn't just come in here and put it up to 6 now. He'd have to knock it down somehow. And then the Northwest Federal District. The Russia player sees this is happening. There's not much he can do here to really stop this without a heavy investment. But this Eastern Balkans is an easier approach. So what he's going to do now is he can either put an army here to try to stop the NATO and EU influence to go into 6, because you can't raise those to 6 with an army. Or he could just start playing influence. And I think that's what he'll do here. He's going to try to fight this for this influence in this location. So he's going to place Russian influence here for 2 money. Oh, it's actually paid like we should. Okay. And now it's the Russia player's place to turn. He's going to place this Baltics card and be comfortable that he can probably stop this from happening. And we will advance. So this marker comes back. We'll draw an event, draw new cards. And note that the Russia player has now cycled through their deck. They would wind up shuffling after this turn, and so would the Europe player. So the Russia player has cycled twice. The Europe player is just now cycling. It's going to be the Europe player's turn to play an event. We've already talked about a couple of these. He's got the 2 Belarus ones. He's going to have to play 1. The Russia player still has this Balkans card and has another Azerbaijan card. So this is great. This has worked out really well for the Russia player. He's got one that it's the Caspian Agreement. It's the exact same conditions, Russian influence over EU, as this card. So he's well postured to grab that twice. The Western Europe player has done nothing to try to stop this, so it looks like the Russia player is probably going to wind up getting that. If the Russia player wanted to stop this turn, he would have to. There's really no way to do that. He can't come in with an army to remove the army and then also reduce this in any way that he can stop it. So this is a foregone conclusion for this turn. And then the same for the next turn with the Azerbaijan. So really what we're posturing for is almost certainly the battle here in the Balkans. And both players know that. This is what it looks like it's going to be the first major battle. So we'll have the Western Europe player who knows that. Maybe he's going to bring in an army so he can use his Turkey card to do that. And maybe he'll go ahead and increase his EU influence. He'll use Italy to do that because it has a very high EU influence boost. And then meanwhile, the Russia player's already indicated he's going to fight for this. So he can try to increase his influence there at a rate that's higher, and he can also move in an army if he wants to. So let's say he uses Azerbaijan to move the army because it's otherwise weak card, and the Central Federal District to raise his influence. So we would have 7 against 10. So the Western Europe player goes first. The first thing they're going to do is use Italy to increase their influence by 4. So it goes to the 5. That's going to give them the card, which is the Eastern Balkans card. And then they're going to use Turkey to move this army in Turkey into the Eastern Balkans. Okay, the Russia player only has 1 money, so he can't move an army from too far away. He's got some options. So let's say he takes the Azerbaijan card. This army is going to move for free, and then he's going to spend 1 money to move it in here to destroy this European, this NATO army. And then he's going to use his influence to boost this to 4. So they'll continue battling over this. So their actions are over. So we're going to look at this card. The condition is true. NATO does, in fact, have more influence than Russia. So this card will go to the Western Europe player. And the Western Europe player is going to play a new card. And he's going to choose to play the Genes Revolution. And we'll advance here. And that is the first 5 rounds of the game. The rest of the game will continue playing out this way. Because the decks, one sort of final couple of notes here, because the decks clearly follow the sort of historical events, timelines, what you'll get is the decks are random, so we're going to remove 6 events from each, or 6 events from the first one, and then also remove events from the second deck. You're not always going to play through them, but more importantly, which player gets which events is going to drive what they put into play. And actually, there will be 1 event per player that never gets placed into play. Each player will have the opportunity to never play one of the 2 events they drew per period, or one of the events they drew per period. And that gives the game a very different feel through every play. But in general, as a broad generalization, the first period is more concerned about the activity that goes on in the Caucasus and the Balkans, as you can probably imagine. And to a lesser extent, the sort of Central Europe. And then in the second period, in the sort of Russia resurgence, there's some additional activity here in the Caucasus, but there's also a very heavy focus on Ukraine, Belarus, and the Baltics. So again, it's just a sort of a general feel that you get through the course of the game, but each one's play is very different because of the sequencing of the events and the value. So I hope that you've enjoyed the walkthrough there and you've gotten a little bit of an idea. Obviously, the heavy military competition and the battling over influence increases through the course of the game. And then by the end, you'll have a board state in each game that's very different depending on where each player has decided to invest their resources for the game. Okay, thanks for watching.